Good morning, everybody. Good to see everyone. My name is Stephen, for those of you who don't know me. It's good to have you. I'm the lead pastor here, and you are joining us in the middle of a series called Jesus the King. I think this is week 9, and in this series, what we've been doing is studying the Gospel of Mark to see who Jesus was and who he still is to this day. And we keep arriving at the same conclusion. He's not just a prophet, he's not just a teacher, he's not just a healer or a leader, he is king. And he's the king that deserves our allegiance. He's the king of the kingdom that we've all been looking for. And so this morning we're going to continue on in this series. And we talked about how last week there was a turning point in this series. Everything up into that point was kind of Jesus establishing who he was. And then after last week's teaching, and about the middle of the book of Mark, there's this turning point where the gospel turns and focuses on something, the cross. And so everything we're seeing now, and everything we saw last week, and everything we'll see over the next couple of weeks, is building up to the cross. It's Jesus trying to get his disciples to understand, I came for a very specific reason, and that reason was to die. And he keeps communicating it to them, but they don't seem to be getting it. We'll see more of that this morning. A couple years ago, more than that now, a great TV show came out called The Office. And I'm sure many of you have watched this or you've rewatched it on Netflix, and you could quote along with me many things that I might say if I started quoting it. One of the great things in The Office is how real it is to office experiences. And one of the things it shows subtly throughout this season is office politics. And there's some great scenes that describe these different office politics. And one of the characters, Dwight, who always wants to gain power and be known as the assistant manager. And there's a running joke. He's not the assistant manager, he's the assistant to the regional manager. Exactly, right? And so this is in common office vernacular to this day. We joke about this. And it's this quest that Dwight has for power, and he is willing to do whatever office politics he might need to do in order to achieve that power. This morning, we're going to see some disciple politics. We're going to see some disciples politicking against other disciples. Why? Their quest for power. It doesn't matter what level, humanity is always the same. Whether you're serving the king of the universe, or you're in the warehouse at your place, or you are the third in command in a Fortune 500 company, everyone, it seems, is striving to be just one level up. From the busboy to the waiter, right? From the assistant to the manager, from the VP to the president. Powering up constantly. It is human nature. It's inside of us. And it's interesting, even in work environments, you'll watch people. You get a different colored shirt. You get an additional title. At some places, you get an extra quarter. Or in other places, you get the country club perk. Whatever it is, at every level. And Jesus begins to see it creeping into his disciples. There's two of them that take the lead in this. Their names are James and John. James and John, it starts, the sons of Zebedee came up to him being Jesus, and said to him, Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you. What a request. Jesus, just something real quick. Whatever we want, will you do it? Now, this is not completely unlike Jesus. In fact, in John 14, Jesus says, ask me anything in my name, and I will do it for you. The hint being, in my name. If you do it in my name, then I will do it for you. And so bold requests before Jesus, our King, are not altogether ridiculous. Jesus isn't exposing James and John's boldness in this. He's exposing their selfishness. Now we look at James and John and we think, how ridiculous for you to approach him. And then you'll see even more how ridiculous it is when they ask him their question. It would be easy as we listen to this to look out at these two disciples and think they're crazy, instead of looking in and to see how we do this as well. In In fact, I think anytime we go to God in prayer and use Him as an avenue to get what we want, it is very similar to this request. Now, I'm not saying that God doesn't want to hear your prayers. I'm not saying that we're not supposed to pray. We are in His name. But there is a type of prayer that, if properly exposed, is really just using Jesus as a genie in a bottle. Advance my selfish desires and or wants. And so I think that anytime we pray in that way, we're not much different than James and John here. He says this, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you." And he says to them, "Well, what do you want me to do for you?" Good response. And they say to him, "Grant us to sit, one at your right hand and one at your left, in your glory." Jesus, at the coronation, at the inauguration, at the moment when all of the eyes of the world are upon you, when everybody is screaming your name, when you're up on top and everyone's looking towards you, in that moment, there's going to be someone standing on your right and your left, and people are going to know that's the prime minister and that's the chief of staff. Hey, can we be that? Can we have the power to disseminate your commands? When we walk through the streets in this kingdom that you're setting up, can it be almost like you're walking through the streets? Can we have that bit of your power? Can you elevate us above the other 10 and above all of those who will come into the kingdom? Every commentator, at least the ones that I checked out, agree that what's happening here is James and John are still not seeing the kingdom as it is. They're still seeing the kingdom of God just like it was an earthly kingdom. Like Jesus was going to march into Rome like a conquering Caesar. And everyone would look to him and bow, and he would set up his cabinet, and he would reign. Jesus has predicted his death more than once already, and they're still not seeing it. You know how we know this? Because Jesus says this: "You do not know what you are asking." You don't get it. You're really, really still missing the point. Now, he'll get in and he'll explain more what that means in a moment, but Jesus stops them in their tracks for a second and just tells them, you don't get it yet. See, all along throughout this, Jesus has been trying to establish the values of his kingdom. Last week, he blew up one of the common perceptions about life, right? The aim of life is to obtain as much wealth as you can. And Jesus says, great, that's the aim of the worldly life. Let me tell you about the kingdom life. It's to disperse as much wealth as you can. And so last week, in his conversation, Jesus blows up the idea of what wealth is supposed to be. This week, Jesus usurps our idea of power and self-interest. He says, yeah, in the world, the aim is to climb up the ladder. Now, let me just give a disclaimer. There is nothing wrong in your professional career with trying to climb up the ladder, though there are certainly kingdom ways to do and not do that. Jesus says in the kingdom, that's not the aim. The aim is not to get to the top so that everyone is serving you. He will explain what the aim is in a moment. He says, you don't know what you're asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink, or to be baptized with the baptism with which I am baptized? They say to him, yeah, we can do that. We are able. And Jesus said to them, the cup that I drink, you will drink. And with the baptism with which I am baptized, you will be baptized. But to sit at my right hand or at my left is not mine to grant, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared. That's a somewhat confusing answer that I will explain more thoroughly in a few minutes. And when the 10 heard it, the other 10 who are sitting around, when they hear that 2 of them have decided to power up brothers, striving together to gain power, they became indignant. Not because they're like, oh, you don't understand the kingdom, but because they're thinking, well, I want to be the chief of staff. I want to be the prime minister. It's like when you're satisfied with your job, but then somebody asks for a raise and you think, well, then I should get a raise. Jesus called to him and said to them, or called to them. He said, whoa. Before we go any further, everybody, everyone just come around. Family meeting. So Jesus brings all the 12 around because Jesus sees something about to happen. He sees how in the kingdom, in the name of faith, what's about to happen is people are going to start striving for power. People are going to start politicking. People are going to start lobbying for votes. People are going to start wanting, in the name of Jesus, a title. They're going to want to be known as more important to the movement than someone else. And he says, whoa, before we get started with this, we got to stop this. Jesus says, hold on. Before the church, before my kingdom ever gets to a place where some people are more important than other people because of a title or a position, or people start fighting with each other to be known as more important than the other, let me just stop you all. I think some of you are intelligent enough to realize that I'm hinting at something. That possibly the church, capital C, we've maybe gone wrong. That even in the church we quest for power. That even in the church we desire title. That even in the church we put people in these high places of authority that come with perks and privileges and all sorts of other things. Jesus says, whoa, that is not what we're doing here. Gather around. And he goes in to make a few comparisons. He says, you know that those who are considered rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them. They lord it over them. Those who are considered rulers outside of the kingdom, you can tell by the way they dress. They wear special outfits. You can tell by the way they tell other people to do things for them. You can tell how it's them, or in their case, it's me, not you. Right? I'm in charge, not you. You can tell. They lord it over people. And their great ones exercise authority over them. I don't have to explain this much in our culture, right? If you have position, if you have power, if you have influence, then you're in charge and on top, and everyone else is underneath at your beck and call. Jesus says, you see this. It's obvious. There's a pastor out of California, and if I need to give him some credibility, Condoleezza Rice goes to his church, and she's really smart, okay? And he says this. And I'm about to read verse 43, but he writes this in one of his books. This pastor's name is John Ortberg. He says, up until Jesus says this line, up until this moment, there is no paradigm in all of antiquity, in all of history. There is no paradigm to view authority and leadership and greatness like how Jesus says. Let me say that another way. No one before this moment right here had ever viewed power and authority the way Jesus is about to say we ought to view it in the kingdom. He says this. You know how they do it. But it shall not be so among you. Let me say it again. But it shall not be so among you. But, or in contrast to how they do it, it's how you handle power and authority shall not be so. You will do it differently among you, those who are in the kingdom. In other words, those who are in the kingdom will handle power and authority and self-interest. I don't want to lose anybody here by thinking this only pertains if you're like the president or the CEO of something. Like, this is how each and every one of us deal with individuals who are below us. This is how every one of us deals with self-interest. Jesus says this, it shall not be so among you. In other words, there shall not be in those who are in my kingdom a quest to be over and in control in a self-seeking way other people. In other words, you shouldn't leverage. You shouldn't manipulate. You shouldn't power up over others. That's not how we'll do it. Self-promotion is not a kingdom value. Self-elevation is not a kingdom value. Elevating others is a kingdom value. Serving others is a kingdom value. Putting you down so I go up is not the kingdom. Speaking down to you because I'm one little rank higher is not the kingdom. Treating subordinates at work or family or anything else like trash is not a kingdom value. In fact, maybe what Jesus is saying here is, do you want to know if you understand the kingdom? How do you treat people who are less than you? Not at church, at work. Not at work, in the restaurant. Are they people to you? Are they people of even greater value than yourself? It shall not be so among you. We will not be people who power up. What will we be then? But whoever would be great among you must be your servant. See, in the world, real leadership uses people. In the kingdom, real leadership serves people. In the world, real greatness is because you're the best, or you survive the longest, or you work the hardest. We have like formulas for this, right? Work hard, fight fears, look out for yourself, greatness. And he says, in the kingdom, I'm going to flip the formula. Real greatness elevates others. Real greatness promotes others. Real greatness asks the question, how can I help you? How is your story, your need, more important than mine? This is not ethereal philosophy. This is every day. This is in family, in work, in the church, in everything. How do I advance you, not me? How does it become about you, not me? But it shall not be so among you. But whoever would be great, and I know we all want to be great, whoever would be great among you must be your servant. The word there used for servant is a word that we could compare to like a server at a restaurant. And so imagine yourself in a culture where eating is the primary source of relational community and deal making. Right? That's what you do. You get together, you eat, you make deals, and there's a servant who brings you food. And if you sit at the front and if you have the fanciest meal, then you're the most important. And Jesus says that's how the world does it, but actually the most important is the person bringing you the food. He says, you want to be great? Become that person. In other words, the world says this, climb the corporate ladder. And Jesus shows this. He climbs down the ladder. He was at the top. He started at the top. And now he's at the bottom. It's the opposite of every rap song. He was at the top, and he kept moving down. It's the CEO saying, you know what, I'll just be the regional manager. It's the regional manager saying, I'll be the assistant to the regional manager. It's the assistant to the regional manager saying, I'll just be a salesman. It's the salesman saying, I'll just be the janitor. He said, I'm going to climb down, not up. And whoever would be first among you must be slave of all. That was a different line. Whoever would be first among you must be slave of all. Now, he starts off as servant. That would be like the equivalent of the server at your restaurant. Then he switches over. He uses a different word, slave, which would be like the busboy. So even in his own little line and phraseology here, Jesus says, this guy, and then he goes, you know what, let's just take it down another notch. He says, let's go all the way down to the person who cleans up after the server. You want to be first? Become the slave of all. Go to the very bottom. Go as low as you can possibly go. Now, I know what you're thinking. Well, I think I do. You're thinking, yeah, but how far do I have to take this? You don't know my coworkers. You don't know the people I deal with. How far do I have to take this, make myself lower thing? I'll just let Jesus give us an example. For even the Son of Man, he's talking about himself, just to clarify. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve. He could have ended it right there. He could have said, even the King, me, the creator of all of this, I didn't come so that other people would serve and elevate me. I came so that I could serve and elevate others. And if I'm the founder of this thing and the creator of this thing, and that's why I'm here, and you want to be a part of this, then that's why you should be here too. For even the Son, that's his first point. If you're thinking, how far do I take this? Jesus' first response to that is, well, I'm not even here to be served. I'm here to serve. Jesus is like, I'm here to operate off of me, not you. Well, how far was Jesus willing to take it? For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. To give his life as a ransom for many. Now, a ransom payment, of course, is something that is paid when someone is captured or enslaved to something. And the fee or the payment is always equivalent to the thing that is captured or enslaved. And so you pay X amount to free X amount. Now I ask, what could be of so much value that someone would have to die for the freedom? But even beyond that, what could be of so much value that God would have to die for it to be free? What could be possibly worth so much? And to give his life as a ransom for many. Many, that's the answer. Who's in the many? Well, I am. Well, you are. That is what was of such exceeding value that God would give his life as a payment. On the cross, is the ultimate example of this. Me, not you. Me, not you. As in, who will pay the penalty of sin? Me, not you. Who will face the wrath of God from all of eternity? Me, Jesus says, not you. Who will be rejected by God? Me, not you. Who deserves to face all of this? You, not me. But who will face it? Me, not you. Who will serve who? Jesus says, I will serve you. Me, not you. He asked James and John earlier when he said to him, you don't know what you're asking. You really don't want to be at my right and my left because you're confused about something. You think that my moment of glory is a coronation of me as king, and it's a beautiful, pristine, Instagrammable moment, but it's not. My moment of glory is a horrific moment. It is an ugly moment. It is a violent moment. My moment of glory, where I will be most in the will of the Father. My moment of glory, where I will be most subservient to His will, is not a moment where you want to be on my right and on my left. You don't want that moment. Because in that moment, in Christ's moment of glory, He's on a cross saying, me, not you. Now, some would say, why did Christ have to die? Doesn't it show that God isn't loving? No. Keller says it this way. All love is substitutionary sacrifice. You might find yourself saying at times, oh, I love that person. Man, they're great. They buy me gifts. They take me to dinner. They make me laugh. They elevate my status. They like my posts. Man, I love them. It's easy to say, isn't it? And what does it cost? Nothing. It only gives. We know what love is. Love is one elderly spouse taking care of the other one. One is the parent loving the child when they know they're not going to get anything back. Love is befriending the person that does nothing to your social status. Love is love because it costs. And so Christ goes to the cross, not despite of God's love, but because of God's love. And He pays the cost. Me, not you. And it's His moment of glory. You know what the cup is? The cup in the Old Testament that was referenced earlier, it's a reference to sorrow and judgment. You know what Jesus is saying when He looked at James and John and He said, you will drink of my cup? He wasn't telling them, you'll drink of my cup of victory, pop the champagne bottle, and let's go. He was saying, you too, if you really step into the kingdom, if you really walk into it, you too will experience sorrow. You know why? Because you will become like me in saying to others, me, not you. As in, who will take the brunt of gossip and not fight back? Me, not you. Who will stay late so that you can go early? Me, not you. Who will keep their mouth shut so that it doesn't escalate? Me, not you. Who will do the dirty job so that you can do the fun one? Me, not you. And at times you begin to ask yourself, how much more of this can I take? Or you begin to think, but if I'm constantly going, me, not you, who's saying you, not me? Christ already did. Christ looked at you and he said, you, not me, so that you and I can say, me, not you. The cross is the ultimate. Him saying, you experience the presence of God. You experience the fullness of God. You experience the riches of my death. And you get everything you need from me on the cross and an ongoing relationship so that you and I, when we walk into the kingdom, can look at anyone and everyone, and even when it almost kills us, say, me, not you. And when we get to that point, we're starting to understand the kingdom. We're starting to get it. Something triggered here in the disciples. You're going to see in the next stories, they're beginning to understand what the kingdom was all about. And I really hope we are too.